I never thought accepting help would cost me everything I loved. The morning I found out I was pregnant, I was standing in the bathroom of my campus apartment with my phone vibrating in my pocket. Third missed call from my manager at the diner. I was already late for my shift, already behind on my biology assignment, already exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix anymore. I'd been working double shifts for 3 months straight, trying to keep up with tuition payments my financial aid didn't cover. My hands were shaking as I stared at those 2 pink lines, and all I could think was, I can't afford this. My name is Amara Banks, and I was 22 years old, 6 months away from finishing my degree in molecular biology at Harrison University. I'd clawed my way there from nothing. My mother cleaned houses in Charleston until her back gave out when I was 16. My father left before I could form memories of his face. I'd worked every day since I was 14, saved every dollar, studied until my eyes burned, because I believed education was the only ladder out of poverty that nobody could kick away from under you. I was wrong about that. The father was Marcus Chen, a graduate student I'd been seeing for 4 months. We'd met in the university library during finals week, both of us surviving on coffee and desperation. He was kind, ambitious, planning to move to California for a tech job after graduation. We were careful, but life doesn't always follow plans. When I told him about the pregnancy that afternoon, sitting in his car outside the biology building, he went completely still. Then he said the words that would echo in my head for months. Amara, I can't do this. My family has expectations. I'm sorry. He transferred me $2,000 the next day with a note that said, for whatever you decide, and blocked my number. I decided to keep the baby. Not because I was ready, not because I had support, but because something fierce and protective flared up inside me the moment I saw those test results. This tiny life didn't ask to exist, but it was mine to protect now. I'd figure it out the way I'd figured out everything else in my life, by working harder than everyone around me. Except my body had different plans. The first time I collapsed was during my shift at Henderson's Diner, 3 weeks after I found out. I was carrying a tray of breakfast plates when the room tilted sideways and the floor rushed up to meet me. I woke up to my manager Jerry's worried face and the sharp smell of ammonia. The doctor at the campus health center used words like extreme stress, malnutrition, and high-risk pregnancy. She told me I needed to reduce my hours, eat better, rest more. I nodded and smiled and didn't tell her that reducing my hours meant choosing between rent and food, that eating better required money I didn't have, that rest was a luxury for people who could afford it. I tried to keep going. I really did. I switched to morning shifts only, dropped one of my classes, started eating the leftover food from the diner that Jerry let me take home, but my body kept betraying me. The exhaustion was crushing, different from regular tiredness. I'd fall asleep standing up, lose track of conversations mid-sentence, feel my hands go numb while taking notes. The pregnancy was draining every reserve I had, and I was already running on empty. Then came the bleeding. It happened during my advanced biochemistry lecture on a Tuesday morning in October. I felt the warmth spreading and knew immediately something was wrong. I managed to walk calmly out of the lecture hall before the panic hit. At the emergency room, a different doctor with tired eyes told me I had a condition called placenta previa, that the pregnancy was considered high risk, that I needed complete bed rest for the next several weeks, or I could lose the baby. I can't stop working, I told her. I'll lose my apartment. She looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been frustration and said, then you might lose your child. Those are your options. I spent that night on the floor of my apartment bathroom, crying so hard I couldn't breathe, trying to figure out how to choose between impossible things. I could barely afford my life before. Now I needed to somehow survive without working while paying for medical care I couldn't afford for a pregnancy that was trying to kill me. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with the weight of decisions I was too young and too poor to make. That's when I met Alexander Winters. I'd seen him around campus before. Everyone had. He was impossible to miss. Tall, silver-haired, always in perfectly tailored suits that probably cost more than my entire year's tuition. He'd donated $40 million to build the new science center and apparently sat on the university's board of trustees. He came to campus once a month for meetings, always surrounded by assistants with tablets and serious expressions. I'd never spoken to him. People like Alexander Winters existed in a different universe than people like me. But 3 days after my emergency room visit, after I'd called Jerry and quit my job with a voice that kept breaking, after I'd sent emails to my professors explaining I was withdrawing from the semester, after I'd started researching homeless shelters that accepted pregnant women, I was sitting on a bench outside the financial aid office trying to figure out my next move when someone sat down beside me. "You're Amara Banks," he said. Not a question. I looked up to find Alexander Winters studying me with sharp gray eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in seconds. Up close, he was even more intimidating. There was an intensity to him, an energy that made the air feel electric.
"How do you know my name?" I asked. "Dr. Patterson mentioned you in last month's board meeting, said you were the most promising undergraduate researcher she'd seen in 20 years, said you were working on something revolutionary related to protein synthesis." He tilted his head. "She seemed disappointed you'd withdrawn from her class." My chest tightened. Dr. Patterson had been my mentor, the one professor who'd believed in my research ideas. I hadn't been able to face telling her why I was leaving. "I had to withdraw," I said quietly. "Personal circumstances." "You're pregnant," he said, and my head snapped up. He raised a hand. "Your advisor mentioned it when I asked why such a brilliant student would suddenly quit. She's worried about you." He paused. "She's not the only one." Something about his tone made my defenses slam up. "I don't need pity." "Good. I'm not offering pity, I'm offering an observation." He leaned back against the bench, somehow making the worn wooden slats look like a throne. "You're in an impossible situation. You need medical care and rest, which requires not working, which means you can't pay for housing or food or the medical care you need. A perfect trap designed by a system that punishes people for being poor." "Why are you here?" The question came out sharper than I intended. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Because I hate waste, and watching someone with your potential destroyed by circumstance is waste. So I have a proposition." I pulled out a business card, set it on the bench between us. "I'll cover all your expenses: rent, food, medical care, tuition when you're ready to return. Everything you need until you graduate and beyond if necessary." My heart started pounding. "Why would you do that?" "Because I can. Because your research on protein synthesis could actually matter. Because," he stopped, something flickering across his face too quickly to read. "Because 30 years ago, someone helped me when I had nothing, and I've spent my life trying to pay that forward." "There's always a catch," I said, years of survival instincts screaming warnings. "The catch," he said slowly, "is that I'm not a charity. I'm an investor. I'm investing in your future, which means I have expectations. You focus on staying healthy, having a healthy baby, and finishing your degree. In return, when you're successful, you do the same for someone else. That's the deal." I stared at the card, stared at this man who could casually offer to change my entire life like it was nothing. Every rational part of my brain said this was too good to be true, that men like him didn't help women like me without wanting something darker in return. But desperation makes you consider impossible things. I need to think about it, I whispered. Of course, he stood, smoothing his suit jacket. My number's on the card. You have 48 hours before the 1st of the month, which I assume is when your rent is due. He paused, looking down at me. Amara, pride is expensive. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept help. Then he walked away, leaving me holding a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I spent 2 days researching Alexander Winters. Tech billionaire, made his fortune in artificial intelligence and biotech. Married once, divorced 12 years ago, no children. Donated hundreds of millions to education and medical research. No scandals, no accusations, nothing that suggested he was anything other than what he appeared to be, a wealthy man who believed in giving back. But I also found something else, an interview from 5 years ago where he talked about his childhood. He'd grown up poor in Detroit, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs. He'd gotten into MIT on a full scholarship, but nearly dropped out his first year because he couldn't afford books and food. A professor had stepped in, had privately funded his education, had saved his life. I was in your position once, the interviewer had asked him. Is that why you give so much to education? I give because I remember what it feels like to be drowning. And I remember that someone threw me a rope instead of advice about learning to swim. On the morning my rent was due, with $17 in my bank account and a baby growing inside me that needed me to stay alive, I called the number on the card. Alexander Winters answered on the second ring. I'll accept your help, I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. I'm paying you back. Every cent. When I graduate and get a job, I'm paying you back. There was a long pause. Then, deal. Although I should warn you, I charge interest. My stomach dropped. How much? One future student helped the way I'm helping you. That's my interest rate. Can you afford it? I closed my eyes, felt something break open in my chest that might have been hope or might have been terror. Yes, I can afford that.
Good. My assistant will contact you within the hour to arrange everything. Amara. His voice softened slightly. You're doing the right thing. Sometimes accepting help is harder than refusing it, but it's not weakness, it's wisdom. An hour later, I had a new apartment lease signed, a credit card for food and medical expenses, and a calendar full of doctor's appointments already scheduled and paid for. It felt like magic, like someone had waved a wand and suddenly all the walls crushing me had vanished. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt afraid. Because I'd learned a long time ago that when something seems too good to be true, it's because you haven't found the price tag yet. The first month of accepting Alexander's help felt like learning to breathe after years of drowning. My new apartment was in a quiet building, 15 minutes from campus, nothing fancy, but clean and safe with actual heat that worked. I had a real bed for the first time in years, not a mattress on the floor. The refrigerator stayed full because I could actually buy groceries instead of surviving on diner scraps and ramen. My obstetrician, Dr. Reeves, was patient and thorough and didn't make me feel ashamed for being young and single and poor. The constant panic that had lived in my chest for months started to quiet. But guilt moved in to take its place. Alexander had given me his assistant Monica's number for anything I needed, but he had also given me his personal cell with instructions to call if there were emergencies. I saved it in my phone and promised myself I'd never use it unless absolutely necessary. This was a business arrangement, an investment, not a friendship. I needed to maintain boundaries, keep it professional, prove I wasn't taking advantage of his generosity. Except Alexander Winters didn't seem to understand boundaries. He started showing up. Not in creepy ways, but in ways that felt calculated to seem casual. I'd be at a prenatal appointment and he'd appear in the waiting room with coffee, saying he had a meeting nearby and thought I might want company. I'd be studying at the campus library and he'd materialize at my table with questions about my research that were too specific to be polite small talk. He knew details about my life I hadn't shared, knew my class schedule, knew which professors I'd been working with before I withdrew. "How do you know all this?" I asked him once, after he mentioned a paper I'd written sophomore year. "I read everything Dr. Patterson sent me about your research," he said like it was obvious. "If I'm investing in you, I should understand what I am investing in." It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being seen. Really seen, maybe for the first time in my life. Alexander asked questions nobody else ever had. Not about the pregnancy, but about my ideas, my theories, my plans for after graduation. He challenged my thinking, pushed back on my assumptions, treated me like an intellectual equal, even though he had 3 decades of experience and billions of dollars, and I was a broke college student carrying someone else's baby. I started looking forward to his visits. Then I started feeling guilty about looking forward to them. "You don't owe him anything except what you agreed to," my friend Jasmine told me when I tried to explain my confusion. She was the only person I'd told about the arrangement, the only person who knew Alexander was funding my life. "He's rich enough that helping you is basically pocket change. Stop overthinking it." But I couldn't stop overthinking it, because the way Alexander looked at me wasn't the way you look at an investment or a charity case. There was something else there. Something I couldn't name but felt every time we were in the same room. The situation got more complicated in November. I was 3 months pregnant, starting to show, and Thanksgiving was coming. I'd planned to spend it alone in my apartment, maybe video call my mother, who was living with her sister in Atlanta now. Try not to think about Marcus Chen celebrating with his family in Boston while pretending I didn't exist. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Alexander called. "What are your plans for Thursday?" he asked without preamble. "Studying, maybe watching movies. Come have dinner with me." I went completely still. "That's not appropriate." "Why not? You don't think investors and their investments can share a meal?" His tone was light, but there was an edge underneath. "I'll be alone otherwise, Amara. My ex-wife has our friends, my parents are gone, and I hate holidays. You'd actually be helping me." "Alexander, it's just dinner. My chef makes an incredible turkey. You need to eat anyway, and the baby needs nutrients. Consider it part of the medical care I'm funding." I should have said no. Every instinct said this was crossing a line, blurring boundaries that needed to stay sharp. But the thought of spending Thanksgiving alone, of watching other people's families while I had none, of feeling that particular holiday loneliness that cuts deeper than regular loneliness, made something in me crack. "Just dinner. And I'm bringing dessert." "Deal."
His house was in the expensive hills outside the city, all glass and modern architecture, with views that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. But inside, it felt empty, beautiful and expensive, and completely devoid of warmth. No photos on the walls, no personal touches, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived there. "It's very clean," I said carefully as he gave me a tour. "You mean it's sterile and sad?" He smiled, but it was bitter. "My ex-wife got everything with personality in the divorce. I got the real estate and the loneliness." Dinner was strange and wonderful and confusing. Alexander's chef had indeed made an incredible meal, and we ate in a dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city lights below. We talked about everything except the obvious, like why a billionaire was spending Thanksgiving with a pregnant college student he barely knew. He told me about building his first company in a garage, about the early days of coding when he'd go 72 hours without sleep, surviving on Mountain Dew and determination.
People think success is about being smarter than everyone else, he said, refilling my water glass. It's not. It's about being too stubborn to quit when smart people would walk away. Is that what you did? Refuse to quit? I refused to let my mother's sacrifices be for nothing. His expression went distant. She died my senior year at MIT. Brain aneurysm. Completely sudden. She never got to see me graduate. Never got to see that all those years of working herself to death had actually meant something. He paused. That's the thing about climbing out of poverty, Amara. You carry ghosts with you, everyone you left behind, everyone who didn't make it. You succeed, but you never stop feeling guilty about it. I'd understood that in my bones. My mother's back is destroyed from cleaning houses. She's 43 years old and moves like she's 70. I'm getting this degree for both of us, but it doesn't fix what's already broken. No, he agreed quietly. It doesn't. But it prevents you from breaking the same way. That matters. After dinner, we sat in his living room and he asked about the baby. Not the logistics, but how I felt about it. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone. How terrified I was of being someone's mother when I had no idea what I was doing. How guilty I felt that this baby's father didn't want them. How afraid I was that I'd screw everything up the way my father had screwed up with me. You won't, Alexander said with absolute certainty. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Because you care enough to be afraid. Bad parents don't worry about being bad parents. Something about his conviction made my throat tight. Why are you really doing this? The truth, not the investment speech. He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Because I see myself in you. Not just the poverty or the struggle, but the loneliness. The feeling that you're fighting the whole world alone and nobody understands what it costs. He turned to look at me. I'm 61 years old, Amara. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I've built companies, funded research that saved lives, donated to every worthy cause. But I go home to an empty house every night and wonder what any of it was for. And then I met you. And I saw someone who actually needs help, who could do remarkable things if someone just gave them a chance. And I thought, maybe this is what it was all for. Maybe you're the point. The air between us felt charged with something I didn't want to name. I should go, I whispered. He drove me home and we didn't talk during the drive. When we pulled up to my building, he said, "Thank you for spending the holiday with me. It was the best Thanksgiving I've had in years." Alexander, I need you to be honest with me. I forced myself to look him directly. Is this really just about helping me succeed? Or is there something else happening here? The depression that had been lurking at the edges since Marcus left came crashing in. I stopped checking my research papers, stopped studying, stopped doing anything except existing. The baby grew inside me while I hollowed out, a shell pretending to be a person. Dr. Reeves noticed at my January appointment. Amara, have you considered speaking with a therapist? Prenatal depression is common and, given your circumstances, I'm fine, I lied. I wasn't fine. I was drowning again, but this time in different waters. Not poverty, but purposelessness. Not hunger, but emptiness. I'd accepted help to survive, but survival wasn't the same as living. On a Friday night in mid-January, 6 months pregnant and more alone than I'd ever been, I did something stupid. I went to a campus party Jasmine dragged me to, even though I couldn't drink and didn't know anyone and had no business being there. I just needed to be around life, around people who weren't broken yet. That's where I ran into Marcus Chen. He was back on campus for the weekend, visiting friends before starting his new job in California. He saw me across the room, saw my very pregnant belly, and went pale. Then he walked over with an expression I couldn't read. "Amara, I didn't know you were still. I thought maybe you'd gotten an abortion?" I finished coldly. "No. Surprise. I sent you money. $2,000. That covered about a month. I shouldn't have engaged, should have walked away, but months of hurt came pouring out. You blocked my number and disappeared, Marcus. You don't get to pretend you did the right thing." "I was scared," he said. And he actually sounded it. I was 24 and completely unprepared, and my parents would have disowned me for getting someone pregnant outside of marriage. I handled it badly. I know that. But I'm here now. He gestured helplessly. "What can I do? How can I help?" "You can't. It's too late." "It's not too late. I'm the father. I have rights, responsibilities. You gave up your rights when you blocked my number." My voice was shaking. "I don't need you now, Marcus. I don't need anything from you." "Then who's helping you? How are you surviving?" I almost didn't answer. But part of me wanted him to know, wanted him to feel something, anything. Someone who actually cares. Someone who showed up when you disappeared. His eyes narrowed. "You're seeing someone else? That's not your business. It is if some random man is going to be around my child." "Your child?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "This stopped being your child when you abandoned us. You don't get to suddenly care now because your guilt caught up with you." We were drawing attention now, people staring. Jasmine appeared at my elbow, took my arm. "We're leaving." Marcus caught my wrist. "Amara, wait, please. I want to be involved. I want to help." I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then up at his face. 6 months ago, I needed you to stay. You left. Now, I don't need you at all. Let me go." He did. Jasmine drove me home, and I cried the whole way, huge, racking sobs that shook my entire body. Not because I wanted Marcus back, but because seeing him made everything real again. Made me remember that this baby was going to exist in the world, was going to have a father who couldn't be bothered to stay, was going to grow up with the same questions I'd grown up with. Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't they want me? When I got to my apartment, Alexander Winters was sitting on the stairs outside my door. "I said Monica was out," he said quietly, standing when he saw my face. "I had a feeling you might need—" He stopped. What happened? And suddenly, I didn't care about boundaries or power imbalances or doing the right thing. I walked straight into his arms and let him hold me while I fell apart. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. He just held me like I was something precious, like I mattered, like I wasn't alone. "I'm so tired," I whispered into his chest. "I'm so tired of being strong." "Then don't be," he said into my hair. "Not tonight. Tonight, you get to just be tired." He helped me inside, made me tea I didn't drink, and sat with me on the couch while I told him everything. About Marcus showing up, about the things he'd said, about my fear that I was bringing a child into a world where they'd never be wanted enough. "This baby is already wanted," Alexander said fiercely. "You want them enough to give up everything. That's more than most people get from 2 parents." "But what if I can't give them enough? What if I'm not enough?" He took my face in his hands, made me look at him. His gray eyes were intense, burning with something I'd never seen before. "Amara Banks, you are the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You have worked and fought and sacrificed for everything you have. You are brilliant and stubborn and brave, and you are going to be an amazing mother. And anyone who can't see that, including Marcus Chen, is an idiot who doesn't deserve you. Alexander! I know I'm not supposed to be here. I know I promised to stay away, but I can't. His voice cracked. I can't stay away from you, Amara. I've tried. I spent 6 weeks trying to convince myself this was just about helping someone succeed, that what I feel is appropriate and reasonable. It's not. Nothing about how I feel about you is reasonable. My heart was hammering. What do you feel? Everything I shouldn't. Everything that's inappropriate and complicated and probably wrong. He dropped his hands, stepped back. You're carrying another man's child. You're dependent on my money. You're 40 years younger than me. Every rational part of me knows I should walk away, but every other part of me is in love with you and has been since the day I saw you on that bench trying to hold yourself together with pure willpower. The world tilted. Say something, he whispered. What could I say? That I felt it too? That somewhere between Thanksgiving dinner and his promise to stay away, I'd started looking for him everywhere? That at night when the baby kicked, I wished he was there to feel it? That being with him felt like coming home, even though nothing about the situation made sense? This is crazy, I said. I know. We're in completely different places in our lives. I know. People will think you're taking advantage of me. I know. He closed his eyes. Tell me to leave, Amara. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm just a means to an end, money and security and nothing more. Lie to me if you have to, but give me a reason to walk away because I can't find one on my own. I should have lied. Should have protected both of us from this mess we were creating. Should have remembered that fairy tales don't come true for girls like me. That men like him don't really love women like me. That this would end badly because it always did. But I was tired of should. Tired of protecting myself. Tired of being alone. I don't want you to leave, I whispered. His eyes opened. Hope and fear and something like relief flashed across his face. Are you sure? Because if we do this, if we cross this line, everything changes. I need you to be sure. I'm not sure about anything, I admitted, except that when I'm with you, I feel less alone. And I've been alone my whole life, Alexander. I'm tired of it. He crossed the space between us in 2 strides and kissed me. It was gentle and desperate at the same time, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he held on too tight. His hands cradled my face like I was made of glass, and I kissed him back with months of loneliness and fear and need pouring out all at once. When we finally broke apart, we were both shaking. This is gonna be complicated, he said against my forehead. Everything about my life is complicated. People are going to judge us. People have been judging me since I got pregnant. I might be making the biggest mistake of my life. I smiled against his lips. You're a billionaire. You can afford a few mistakes. He laughed, really laughed, and pulled me back into his arms. The baby kicked between us, a sharp jab against both our stomachs. Alexander went completely still, then put his hand where the movement had been, eyes wide with wonder. Was that? That's the baby saying hello. He dropped to his knees, pressed his face against my belly, and I felt his shoulders shake. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I'm going to be here for this, for all of it, for the birth, for the midnight feedings, for the first day of school, for everything, if you'll let me. You don't have to. I want to. He stood, kept his hand on my stomach. I know I'm not this baby's biological father, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. That has to count for something. It counted for everything. We spent that night talking about all the ways this could go wrong, all the obstacles we'd face, all the reasons this was a terrible idea. And then we decided to do it anyway. Because sometimes, terrible ideas are the only ones worth having. But neither of us realized that the real complications were just beginning. Falling in love with Alexander Winters was like stepping off a cliff and discovering you could fly. For 3 weeks, we existed in a bubble where nothing else mattered. He'd come over after his business meetings and we'd cook dinner together. Or rather, I'd watch him cook, because the man had taken classes from actual chefs and made food that belonged in restaurants. We'd talk for hours about everything: our childhoods, our fears, my research, his companies. He'd read my old papers and ask questions that made me see my work in new ways. At night, he'd lie with his hand on my belly, feeling the baby kick, talking to them like they could already understand. "You're going to be so loved," he'd whisper. "Your mother is the strongest person I've ever met, and I'm not going anywhere. We've got you." I'd never felt safer in my life. But reality doesn't let you hide forever. The first crack appeared on a Monday morning in February. I was 7 months pregnant, enormous and uncomfortable, waddling to a prenatal appointment when I ran into Dr. Patterson outside the biology building. She'd been my mentor before I withdrew, the professor who'd believed in my research. "Amara," she said, her face lighting up. "I've been hoping to run into you. How are you feeling?" "Good, really good, actually. I'm planning to re-enroll for summer session if I can." "That's wonderful news. Alexander mentioned you might be ready to return." She smiled. "He speaks very highly of you. I think he's even more excited about your research than I am." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "You've talked to him recently?" "Just last week. He was asking about your protein synthesis work, whether I thought you'd be ready to defend it for early graduation." She tilted her head. "He's very invested in your success. I'm glad he decided to help you." After she walked away, I stood there feeling sick. The way she'd said it, invested in your success, like she knew something more, like people were talking. I called Alexander that afternoon. "Do people on campus know about us?" There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "Dr. Patterson just made a comment that felt loaded. Does she know we're together?" "I haven't told anyone explicitly," he said carefully, "but I may not have been as discreet as I should have been. I mentioned you in a board meeting last month, and I've been asking professors about you. It's possible people have connected dots." "Alexander, I depend on you for everything. If people think we're together, they're going to think I'm sleeping with you for money." "Then they'd be wrong. We're together because we care about each other. You know it doesn't matter what's actually true. It matters what it looks like." He sighed. "Do you want me to stop coming around? We can keep this private if that's what you need." "No," I said immediately, and hated how desperate I sounded. I wish things were simpler." "Nothing worth having is simple, Amara." But the doubts had been planted. I started noticing things I'd been too happy to see before. The way Monica's expression went carefully neutral when Alexander and I were together. The way other students in my building seemed to whisper when I walked by. The way I couldn't tell anyone about my relationship because it sounded too much like a Lifetime movie. Broke, pregnant student and billionaire benefactor fall in love. Nobody would believe it was real. Then, Marcus Chen came back. He showed up at my apartment on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after our encounter at the party. I opened the door to find him standing there with flowers and a desperate expression. "Before you close the door, please just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I should have slammed the door in his face. Instead, I let him in, because some self-destructive part of me needed to hear what he had to say. "I've been talking to my therapist," he started, sitting on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable, "about how I handled everything, about my fear, about running away. She helped me see that I wasn't ready to be a father because I hadn't dealt with my own childhood trauma. My dad was absent, emotionally unavailable, and I was terrified of becoming him. And you think telling me this changes what you did? No, nothing changes what I did." He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. "I abandoned you when you needed me most. I was a coward. But I'm here now, Amara. I'm ready to step up. I want to be part of this baby's life." "Why?" Because your therapist told you to feel guilty? Because it's the right thing to do. Because I think about this every day. Because I don't want to be the guy who runs away from his responsibilities. You're already that guy, Marcus. You've been that guy for 7 months. Then let me become someone different. He leaned forward. I've been doing research, preparing. I know about custody arrangements, co-parenting, child support. I want to be a real father, not just a check every month. Please, give me a chance to prove I've changed. Every word he said made logical sense. The baby deserved to have their biological father involved if he was willing. I'd grown up without a father and knew that ache, that hole that never quite filled. How could I deny my child something I'd always wanted? But I also couldn't forget the months of silence, the blocked number, the way he'd made me feel disposable. I need time to think about it, I said finally. That's fair. Take all the time you need. He stood, then hesitated. Amara, at the party, you said someone was helping you. Is it serious? That's none of your business. It is if he's going to be around my child. Our child, I corrected coldly. And yes, it's serious. He's been here for me when you weren't. He's been more of a father to this baby already than you've ever been. Marcus's jaw tightened. What's his name? Why does it matter? Because I have a right to know who's in my child's life. You forfeited your rights, Marcus. But if you must know, his name is Alexander Winters. I watched the blood drain from Marcus's face. The Alexander Winters? The billionaire on the board? Yes. Jesus Christ, Amara. You actually laughed, sharp and bitter. You're sleeping with a 60-year-old billionaire who's paying your bills. Do you not see how this looks? Get out. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to make you see reality. He's old enough to be your grandfather. He has all the power in this relationship. You're completely dependent on him. I said get out. My voice was shaking. You don't get to disappear for 7 months and then show up and judge my life. You lost that right. I'm not judging. I'm worried. This is textbook grooming, Amara. Wealthy older man finds vulnerable young woman, offers help, creates dependence, then starts a relationship. It's predatory. You don't know anything about him or us. I know you're pregnant and broke, and he has billions of dollars. That's not a relationship. That's a power imbalance. He moved toward the door but stopped. I'm going to file for custody, Amara. Partial custody, shared parenting time. I've already talked to a lawyer, but I'm telling you first as a courtesy. You wouldn't dare! I'm the biological father. I have rights, whether you like it or not. And if you're involved with someone inappropriate, someone who might not be safe for our child, that's going to factor into the custody discussion. He opened the door. Think about it. Really think about whether this relationship with Winters is healthy or if you're just too desperate to see what's really happening. He left, and I stood there shaking with rage and fear and something worse, doubt. When Alexander came over that night, I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. He's going to file for custody, Alexander said quietly. He says he has rights. He does. Legally, he's the father. If he wants to be involved, you can't stop him. He ran a hand through his hair. Amara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you think there's any truth to what he said about our relationship being predatory? No, I said immediately. Are you sure? Because the power imbalance he mentioned is real. I do have all the money. You are dependent on me for housing and food and medical care. If you wanted to leave, it would be extremely difficult. I don't want to leave. But could you? He looked at me intently. If you woke up tomorrow and decided this was wrong, could you walk away? Or would you feel trapped? The question hung between us, heavy with implications. Could I walk away? Where would I go? How would I survive? The honest answer was that I didn't know, and that uncertainty was exactly what Marcus was pointing to. I don't feel trapped, I said slowly. I feel grateful. There's a difference. Is there? Because from the outside, gratitude and obligation look very similar. He stood, paced to the window. Maybe Marcus is right. Maybe I did something unconscionable here. You were vulnerable, desperate, and I offered everything you needed. Then I developed feelings, and instead of stepping back like I should have, I pursued them. That's not ethical, Amara. That's taking advantage.
You're not taking advantage of me. How do you know? How do you know you have real feelings for me versus feelings created by dependence and gratitude? Because I know my own mind. Do you? He turned to face me. You're 22 years old and 7 months pregnant. You've been under extreme stress for nearly a year. You're not thinking clearly, and I should have known better than to let this happen. Fear lanced through me. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we need to step back. Reassess this relationship when you're not dependent on me for survival. So what? You're breaking up with me? I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing? I laughed, but it came out broken. The right thing was staying in the first place, Alexander. You can't make me fall in love with you and then decide it's inappropriate. You can't become part of this baby's life and then walk away because you're suddenly worried about ethics. I'm not walking away from the baby. I promise to be there and I will be. But the romantic relationship was real, I finished. It was real to me. If it wasn't real to you, if this was some kind of charity project that got complicated, then just say so. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I was crying now, huge tears rolling down my face. Marcus left me. You found me. We fell in love, or I thought we did. Now you're leaving too because Marcus made you feel guilty. How is any of that fair? Alexander crossed the room, pulled me into his arms. I'm not leaving. I'm just scared I've hurt you in ways I can't fix. Then don't leave, I whispered into his chest. Don't let Marcus win. Don't let other people's opinions destroy what we have. He held me tighter. What do we have, Amara? Really? I don't know, I admitted, but I want to find out. Don't you? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, yes. God help me. Yes. We spent that night holding each other, not talking about the future, because the future felt too fragile to touch. But in the morning, reality came crashing back. Marcus had filed for custody. A legal letter arrived at my apartment outlining his intention to seek joint physical custody and decision-making rights for the baby. He'd also filed a motion questioning Alexander's role in the child's life, suggesting the relationship was inappropriate and potentially harmful. He's using our relationship against you, Alexander said, reading the letter over my shoulder. Can he do that? In a custody hearing, he can bring up anything he thinks is relevant to the child's well-being. Alexander's expression was grim. This is my fault. I've put you in an impossible position. Stop, I said firmly. Marcus is doing this, not you, and we're going to fight it. How? Everything he's saying is technically accurate. I am 40 years older than you. You are financially dependent on me. A judge might decide that's not a healthy environment for a child. Then we'll prove them wrong. But proving people wrong turned out to be harder than fighting for survival had ever been. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare of lawyer consultations and character witnesses and depositions. Marcus's attorney painted me as a young woman who'd gotten pregnant irresponsibly, dropped out of school, and immediately attached herself to a wealthy older man for financial support. They made Alexander sound like a predator, presenting our age gap and financial arrangement as evidence of an inappropriate relationship. My lawyer tried to counter by showing that Alexander had helped me stay healthy during a high-risk pregnancy, that his support had been charitable and selfless, that our relationship had developed naturally over time. But even to my own ears, it sounded like a fairy tale nobody would believe. The worst part was watching Alexander withdraw. Not physically, he was still there, still helping, still supportive, but emotionally he was pulling back, putting distance between us, and I could feel him slipping away. You're doing it again, I said one night after a particularly brutal meeting with lawyers. You're leaving without actually leaving. I'm trying to protect you. From what?
From me, from the damage this relationship is causing. He looked exhausted, older than I'd ever seen him. Amara, if being with me means you lose custody of your child, then I can't be with you. It's that simple. It's not simple. Nothing about this is simple. Then let me make it simple. He took my hands. I love you. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, but I won't be the reason you lose your baby. So we end this now, publicly. I remain your financial supporter, but nothing more. We give Marcus no ammunition for his custody case. And after, when the custody hearing is over, if you still want me, if you still think this is real and not just dependence or gratitude, then we can try again. But you have to be sure, Amara. You have to know with absolute certainty that you're choosing me because you want to, not because you need to. Every part of me wanted to argue, to fight, to prove that what we had was real. But I was also terrified of losing my baby. Terrified that Marcus might be right, that I'd gotten so desperate I'd convinced myself a billionaire's charity was love. Okay, I whispered. We'll end it. For now. The relief and pain on Alexander's face matched exactly what I felt. We broke up, or pretended to break up, though it felt disturbingly real. Alexander stopped coming to my apartment. I stopped calling him. We communicated only through Monica about practical matters. To the outside world, we were exactly what he'd claimed from the beginning: investor and investment, mentor and student, nothing more. It was the loneliest I'd been since before I met him. And then, 3 weeks before my due date, everything fell apart in a way I never saw coming. The pain started on a Tuesday afternoon, 8 months and 2 weeks into my pregnancy. I was in my apartment, folding tiny clothes I'd bought with Alexander's money, trying not to think about the custody hearing scheduled for next week. The first cramp hit low in my abdomen, sharp enough to make me gasp. Then, wetness spreading, and I looked down to see blood soaking through my clothes. I called 911 with shaking hands. At the hospital, Dr. Reeves' calm professional mask slipped when she saw the test results. Amara, the placenta is detaching. We need to do an emergency C-section now. It's too early. The baby's not ready. The baby won't survive if we don't operate immediately. I need you to sign the consent forms. Everything after that was a blur of motion and terror. Nurses rushing, surgical lights, the anesthesiologist talking in a soothing voice while my body went numb from the chest down. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop thinking that I was going to lose this baby I'd fought so hard to keep. Someone call Alexander Winters. His number is in my phone, please. I don't remember them cutting me open. I don't remember the moment they pulled my daughter from my body. I only remember the silence, the terrible absence of sound where a baby's cry should have been. Is she alive? I asked, but nobody answered. Then a thin wail, weak but unmistakable, and I started crying. She's breathing on her own, Dr. Reeves said. 4 pounds, 3 ounces. She's small, but she's a fighter. They showed her to me for 3 seconds, a tiny purple creature with eyes squeezed shut, before whisking her away to the NICU. I tried to reach for her, but my arms wouldn't move properly, and then she was gone. The next hours were agony, recovery from surgery while going out of my mind with worry. Nurses with gentle voices telling me my daughter was stable but critical, that the next 72 hours would be crucial, that I couldn't see her yet because my blood pressure was too high. Alexander arrived 6 hours after the surgery, bursting through the door like he'd run the whole way. His face was pale, his usually perfect suit rumpled. "Why didn't anyone call me sooner?" he demanded. I'm on her emergency contact list. They called you right away, a nurse said. You were in San Francisco. He'd chartered a plane the moment he got the call, dropped everything, left a meeting with potential investors worth hundreds of millions, and flew back because I'd asked for him. Have you seen her? I asked weakly. Not yet. I wanted to see you first. He sat on the edge of my hospital bed, took my hand carefully. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. Is she going to be okay? I don't know, he said honestly, but I'm here, and I'm not leaving until we know. Alexander, we're not together anymore. You don't have to. I watched him fall in love with my daughter, and I fell more in love with him. On the day they finally said Hope could come home, I found Alexander in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. She's being discharged in 2 hours, I said, sliding into the chair across from him. That's wonderful. Alexander, we need to talk. He looked up, and I saw fear flash across his face. About what? About us. About whether the last 6 weeks were pretend or if they were the realest thing that's ever happened to me. Amira, let me finish. Marcus dropped the custody case. The legal threat is gone, which means we don't have to pretend anymore. We can be together if we want to be, or we can end this for real. But I need to know what you want, not what you think is ethical or appropriate or right. What do you want? He was quiet for a long time. Then, I want to take you and Hope home. I want to wake up at 3 a.m. for feedings and change diapers and watch her grow. I want to help you finish your degree and see your research published and watch you become everything you're meant to be. I want to build a life with you, even though everyone will say it's wrong, even though the age gap is massive, even though it's complicated and messy. I want you, Amira. I've wanted you since the moment I saw you on that bench. Then why have you been pulling away? Because I'm terrified, his voice cracked. I'm terrified you're going to wake up one day and realize you settled for me because I had money and you were desperate. I'm terrified you're going to resent me for being old when you're still young. I'm terrified I'm going to fail you and Hope the way I failed everyone I've ever loved. I reached across the table, took his hands. Alexander Winters, you are the least likely person to fail anyone. You showed up when I had nothing. You stayed when it got complicated. You love my daughter like she's yours, even though she's not. You're not perfect, but you're here, and that matters more than anything else. Are you sure? He whispered. Are you absolutely sure you want this? Want me? I've never been more sure of anything. He came around the table, pulled me into his arms, and kissed me like he'd been drowning and I was air. When we broke apart, we were both crying. I love you, he said. I love you so much, it terrifies me. I love you too, and I'm going to prove to you every day that this is real. We brought home Hope together to Alexander's house that he'd been frantically baby-proofing for a week. He'd converted an entire wing into a nursery, hired a night nurse to help, bought every book on infant care ever written. He was prepared for everything, except how small she looked in her car seat, how fragile, how precious. What if I break her? He whispered as we carried her inside. You won't. We'll figure it out together. And we did. Those first weeks were exhausting and beautiful and terrifying. Hope was a good baby, all things considered, but she was premature and needed extra care. Alexander and I took shifts, learned to function on no sleep, became fluent in the language of newborn cries. My mother flew in from Atlanta when Hope was a month old. I'd finally told her everything over the phone, expecting judgment or disappointment. Instead, she cried and said, "Baby, I just want you to be happy and safe. Everything else is details." She met Alexander with skeptical eyes, but I watched her soften as she saw how he was with Hope, how gentle and devoted. By the end of her visit, she pulled me aside and said,
That man loves you both like you hung the moon. Don't let anyone make you doubt it. I enrolled in summer classes when Hope was 3 months old. Alexander hired help so I could study, but he also took time off work to be present, to be a real father, even though no biology connected them. He was there for Hope's first smile, her first laugh, her first time sleeping through the night. I can't believe how lucky I am, I said one night, watching him rock her to sleep while humming off key. Lucky, he smiled. Amara, you've worked for everything you have. Luck has nothing to do with it. I'm lucky you met me. No, I'm lucky you took a chance on me. But as Hope grew and I returned to school and our life settled into something like normal, new complications emerged. The article appeared on a Monday morning in September, when Hope was 6 months old and I was back at Harrison University full-time. Billionaire's baby, Alexander Winters and the college student he rescued, ran in a prominent business magazine, complete with photos someone had taken of Alexander and I leaving the pediatrician's office with Hope. The article laid out our entire story: my poverty, my pregnancy, his financial support, our relationship. It painted him as either a saint or a predator, depending on which paragraph you read, and me as either a victim or a gold digger.
Amara, I don't care what we're pretending to be for Marcus's custody case. That's our daughter in the NICU, and I'm not going anywhere. Our daughter. He'd said it so naturally, like it was fact. They let me see her the next morning. She was in an incubator, hooked up to monitors and tubes, so small she barely looked real. Her chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance, and every beep of the monitors made my heart jump. She's beautiful, Alexander whispered beside me. She was. Underneath all the medical equipment, she was perfect. Tiny fingers that gripped Alexander's pinky when he slid it into the incubator, a dusting of black hair, my nose, but surprisingly something of Alexander in her expression, even though that was genetically impossible. "What are you going to name her?" a nurse asked. I hadn't decided. I'd been so focused on surviving the pregnancy and the custody battle that I hadn't thought about names. "Hope," Alexander said quietly, "because that's what she is." I looked at him, saw the tears tracking down his face, and nodded. Hope Eleanor Banks. Eleanor had been his mother's name. The nurse smiled. "That's beautiful." Marcus showed up on day 3. I was in the NICU, hand through the incubator port, stroking Hope's tiny arm, when he walked in. I'd almost forgotten about him in the chaos of Hope's birth, had forgotten the custody battle and the lawyers and all of it. "Amara," he said softly, "I just heard. Is she okay?" "She's fighting." He moved closer, stared at his biological daughter through the plastic. "She's so small." "Premature babies usually are." Can I touch her?" Every instinct said no, but legally he had rights, and despite everything, this was his daughter. "Ask the nurse." They let him put his hand in the incubator. Hope didn't grip his finger the way she'd gripped Alexander's. She didn't respond at all, just kept breathing her mechanical breaths. "I'm sorry," Marcus said after a long silence. "For the custody case, for the accusations, for everything. I was angry and I handled it wrong." "You've been handling everything wrong since the beginning." "I know." He pulled his hand back. "I'm dropping the custody case." I turned to look at him. "What?" "I'm dropping it. I was talking to my therapist about why I was really doing this, and she helped me see I wasn't trying to be a father. I was trying to punish you for moving on without me, for finding someone who could be what I couldn't." He gestured at Hope. "She deserves better than that. She deserves a father who wants her for the right reasons, not as a weapon in a fight." "So you're just giving up?" "I'm accepting reality. I'm not ready to be a father. Maybe someday, but not now. And forcing it would hurt everyone, especially her." He looked at me. "But I want to pay child support, not because I'm legally required to, but because it's the right thing to do. Let me at least contribute financially." It was the most mature thing I'd ever heard him say. "Okay," I said quietly. "We can figure out the details later." "Is Winter still in the picture?"
That's none of your business. I'm not asking to judge. I'm asking because if he is, that little girl is lucky. I've seen how he looks at you, how he looks at her. Whatever I said before, I was wrong. He's not predatory. He's in love with you. Marcus smiled sadly. Take care of yourself, Amara, and her. You're going to be an amazing mother. He laughed, and I stood there processing. Marcus had dropped the custody case. The legal threat was gone, which meant Alexander and I didn't have to pretend anymore, if what we had was real. Hope stayed in the NICU for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of monitors and feeding tubes and terrifying moments when her oxygen levels dropped. Alexander was there every single day, sometimes sleeping in the chair beside my hospital bed, sometimes sitting by Hope's incubator for hours, talking to her in a low voice. You're going to love the world, he'd tell her. Your mother is going to teach you about science and strength and never giving up. And I'm going to teach you about joy and possibility and how to make the perfect omelet. We're going to take care of you so well, little one. You're so loved already.
The photos had been taken without our knowledge or consent, but that didn't matter. By noon, the story had been picked up by dozens of outlets. By evening, we were trending on social media, with thousands of strangers debating whether our relationship was inspiring or disgusting. They're calling me a cradle robber, Alexander said, scrolling through his phone with a pained expression. Saying I groomed you, took advantage of your situation. They're calling me a sugar baby, I countered, reading my own phone, saying I got pregnant on purpose to trap a rich man. We were in his living room, Hope asleep in a bassinet between us, while our relationship was dissected by people who'd never met us. I can issue a statement, Alexander said. Explain the timeline. Make it clear that our relationship developed naturally. It won't matter. People have already decided what they think. I set my phone down. Are you regretting this? Us? Never. But I'm sorry you have to go through this. The media attention was brutal, but it eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals and fresher outrage. What didn't fade was the impact on my life at school. Some professors treated me differently now, like I was either pitiable or suspicious. Other students whispered when I walked by. I'd become the girl who'd gotten pregnant and landed a billionaire. A cautionary tale or a fairy tale, depending on who was telling it. Ignore them, Jasmine advised. You know the truth. That's what matters. But it was hard to ignore when Dr. Patterson called me into her office. Amara, I need to ask you something difficult, she said, looking uncomfortable. There are concerns being raised about your research funding and whether it's appropriate for Alexander Winters to be supporting you financially given your relationship. My stomach dropped. He's not funding my research. He's funding my life so I can do research. There's a difference. Is there? Because from an ethical standpoint, there are questions about conflicts of interest, about whether your work can be viewed as independent when you're financially and personally entangled with a major university donor. Are you saying I can't continue my research? I'm saying we need to be careful about appearances. I believe in your work, Amara, but other people need to believe in it too. And right now, there's doubts about whether you're being supported on merit or for other reasons. I left her office shaking with rage and humiliation. I'd worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and now people were questioning whether I deserved my success, whether anything I accomplished was real or just bought by my rich boyfriend. That night, I told Alexander I was moving out. What? Why? He looked genuinely shocked. Because I can't keep living like this. People think I'm with you for your money, that everything I have is because of you. I need to prove I can stand on my own. Alexander, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Yes, I do. I have to prove it to myself. I love you. I love our life together, but I can't build my career on a foundation that people will always question. I need to finish school on my own merit, get my degree on my own work, build something that's mine. So you're leaving me? I'm not leaving you. I'm living separately until I graduate. We can still be together, still be a family, but I need my own space that I pay for with money I earn.
Understanding flickered across his face, followed by pain. If that's what you need, I support it. But Amara, let me help. No, no more help. I'll get student loans for tuition. I'll find part-time work I can do with Hope. I'll figure it out the way I was trying to figure it out before you found me. What about Hope? Are you taking her? That stopped me cold. Hope was sleeping in the nursery Alexander had built, surrounded by everything he'd provided. She knew his voice, his smell, his heartbeat. Taking her away felt cruel. We share custody, like real co-parents. She stays with me some nights, with you others. We figure out a schedule that works. The pain on his face was devastating. Are you really doing this? I have to. Don't you see? I'll always wonder if I could have made it without you. I'll always doubt whether anything I achieve is real. I need to know I can do this. He was quiet for a long time. Then, okay, but I have one condition. What?
You let me pay for a safe apartment in a good neighborhood. Not for you, for Hope. I won't have my daughter living somewhere unsafe just to prove a point. It was reasonable, but it still felt like charity. Fine, but I'm paying you back. Every cent with interest. I'm not charging you interest. You charged interest when we first met. One future student helped. That was your rate. He smiled despite himself. That's still my rate, and you're going to exceed it. I found a small 2-bedroom apartment near campus. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. Furnished it with Goodwill finds and hand-me-downs. Got a part-time job doing data analysis for a research lab that paid barely anything, but kept my resume current. Took out loans to cover tuition. Started living the life I would have lived if Alexander had never found me. Except now I had a baby and an exhausted body still recovering from pregnancy complications. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Hope stayed with Alexander 4 nights a week, with me 3. On his nights, I studied until my eyes burned, worked until exhaustion pulled me under, pushed myself to prove I could excel without his help. On my nights, I did the same, while also caring for an infant, functioning on no sleep, slowly falling apart. Alexander watched it happen with growing concern. "You're destroying yourself to prove a point," he said one night when he picked up Hope. "I'm building something that's mine." At what cost? You've lost 15 pounds you didn't have to lose. You look exhausted. When was the last time you slept more than 4 hours? I'll sleep when I graduate. Amara, this isn't strength. This is self-destruction. You don't get it. You never will. I was too tired to filter my words. You pulled yourself up by your bootstraps once, but then you got rich and you forgot how hard it is. You forgot what it's like to choose between eating and studying, between sleep and survival. You think writing a check is help, but sometimes help feels like theft. It steals your chance to prove you could have made it on your own. And if you can't? He asked quietly. If trying to do this alone breaks you, was the price worth it? I didn't have an answer. 3 months into my self-imposed exile, I collapsed during a lecture, just like I'd collapsed at the diner all those months ago, except this time I was standing at the front of the room presenting my research. One moment I was explaining protein synthesis. The next, the floor was rushing up to meet me. I woke up in the campus health center with Dr. Reeves standing over me, looking stern. Your iron levels are dangerously low. You're malnourished and sleep-deprived. Amara, you just had a baby 8 months ago via emergency C-section. Your body is still healing and you're treating it like it's invincible. I don't have time to be sick. You don't have time to be dead either, but that's where you're heading. She sat down, her expression softening. What are you trying to prove and to who? That I'm not just some girl who got lucky and landed a rich guy. That I'm actually smart and capable and deserving of everything I'm working toward. Amara, you nearly died bringing hope into this world. You survived a high-risk pregnancy while broke and alone. You're raising a baby while completing one of the hardest science programs in the country. You've already proven everything you need to prove. Then why doesn't it feel like enough? Because you're trying to outrun your past instead of accepting it. You came from poverty. That's not a shame. It's a reality. Alexander helped you survive. That's not weakness. It's wisdom. You accepted help when you needed it.
Now you're punishing yourself for it, trying to prove you didn't need it after all, but you did need it, Amara, and that's okay. Her words hit like a physical blow. I called Alexander from the health center. Can you keep hope tonight? I need to think about some things. Of course. Are you all right? I don't know. I spent that night alone in my apartment, really looking at what I'd built. The shabby furniture, the empty refrigerator because I'd skipped groceries to buy textbooks, the exhaustion that had become so constant I'd stopped noticing it. I'd been so focused on proving I didn't need help that I forgot to ask if what I was building was actually better than what I had. Pride, Alexander had once told me, is expensive. I'd been paying for mine by stealing from myself and hope, stealing sleep and health and joy, sacrificing connection for independence, destroying the present to prove something about the past.
The next morning, I went to Alexander's house. He answered the door with Hope in his arms, both of them looking at me with matching expressions of hope and fear. "Can we talk?" I asked. We sat in his living room, the same room where we'd first admitted we loved each other, and I told him everything. About my fear of being seen as dependent, about my need to prove my worth, about how terrified I was that people would always dismiss my accomplishments because of him. "But I'm more terrified of losing you," I finished, "of sacrificing our family to prove a point that doesn't actually matter. You were right. I've been destroying myself. And for what? So strangers will think I'm independent? So I can tell myself I didn't need you? But I did need you, Alexander. I still do. And needing someone isn't weakness. It's just love." He was crying. I'd never seen him cry before except when Hope was born. "I need you too," he said. "These 3 months without you have been hell. I wake up and reach for you and you're not there. Hope cries for you on the nights she's with me. We're a family, Amara. Distance doesn't change that. I want to come home, if you'll still have us." "If I'll still have you?" He laughed through tears. "Amara, I've been waiting for you to say that since the day you left." We didn't solve everything that day. I still went back to school, still finished my degree, still published my research. But I did it from Alexander's house, with his support and love, without apology or shame. When people questioned whether my success was real or bought, I learned to not care. I knew the truth. Alexander knew the truth. That was enough. I graduated summa cum laude the following spring, with Hope in the audience wearing a tiny cap and gown Alexander had custom made. My mother flew in from Atlanta. Even Marcus came, kept his distance, but clapped when I walked across the stage. Dr. Patterson presented me with an award for outstanding undergraduate research, she said. Amara Banks has demonstrated not only exceptional scientific ability, but also exceptional resilience. She's overcome obstacles that would have stopped most students, and she's done it with grace and determination. She's exactly the kind of scientist our field needs. After the ceremony, Alexander pulled me aside. "I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. It would have been harder, but you would have found a way. You're the strongest person I know, Amara Banks." "Soon to be Amara Winters?" I said, and watched his eyes go wide. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking if you'd want to marry me. Someday, when people can't accuse you of taking advantage of a desperate college student." He pulled a ring box from his jacket pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 6 months, waiting for the right moment." Inside was the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. Simple and elegant and perfect. "Marry me," he said. "Let me spend the rest of my life proving that loving you was the best decision I ever made." "Yes," I said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Hope was flower girl, toddling down the aisle, scattering petals everywhere. My mother cried through the whole thing. Jasmine gave a speech about how she'd known we were meant to be together since Thanksgiving dinner.
2 years later, I defended my dissertation and earned my PhD. Alexander was in the front row with Hope, now 3 years old, who kept whispering, "That's my mommy!" loud enough for the whole room to hear. 5 years after that, I published a breakthrough paper on protein synthesis that changed our understanding of cellular biology. It won major awards and opened doors I'd never dreamed possible. People interviewed me about my research, my career, my path to success. Sometimes they asked about Alexander, about our age gap, about how we met. I'd learned to answer honestly without shame. He helped me when I needed help. Then we fell in love. It's not complicated. On our 10th anniversary, Alexander surprised me with something better than jewelry or trips: a foundation. The Banks Winters Foundation for Student Parents, he said, showing me the paperwork. Full support for pregnant and parenting students trying to finish their education. Housing, medical care, childcare, tuition, everything. So nobody else has to choose between their baby and their future. I ugly cried reading through the mission statement. "Your interest rate is coming due," he said with a smile. "Time to help that future student you promised." We've funded hundreds of students over the years. Watched them graduate, watched them build careers, watched them pay it forward the way I'd promised to do. Every thank you letter felt like closing a circle, like proving that accepting help hadn't been weakness, but the beginning of something bigger.
Hope grew up brilliant and kind, with Alexander's determination and my curiosity. She never questioned whether Alexander was her real father. To her, he'd always been Dad, the man who'd rocked her to sleep and taught her to ride a bike and attended every school play. When she was 10, she asked about Marcus. "He's your biological father," I explained, "but biology doesn't make someone a parent. Love and presence do that. Your dad earned that title every day for 10 years. Marcus sent child support faithfully and birthday cards occasionally. He'd married someone else, had other children, built a life that didn't include Hope. It hurt her sometimes, that absence, but she had enough love from us that the whole never defined her. Now, sitting in my university office with my name on the door and Dr. Amara Banks Winters on my diploma, I sometimes think about that girl on the bench outside the financial aid office. Broke and pregnant and terrified, trying to figure out how to choose between impossible things. I'd tell her that accepting help isn't failure, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you can't do everything alone, that love can come from unexpected places, and age gaps and power dynamics and other people's opinions don't matter half as much as showing up and staying when things get hard. I'd tell her that she's stronger than she knows, that she'll survive things that should break her, that the baby growing inside her will become the most incredible person she's ever met. But mostly, I'd tell her that everything's gonna be okay. Better than okay. That the man about to sit down beside her on that bench is going to change her life in ways she can't imagine, and that 10 years from now, she'll be happy in ways she never thought possible. Because sometimes, when you're drowning, someone throws you a rope instead of advice about learning to swim. And sometimes you fall in love with the person holding the other end. And sometimes that's enough to build a whole life on. Hope's in elementary school now, Alexander's mostly retired, and I'm running a research lab that's doing work I'm genuinely proud of. We eat dinner together every night, take vacations to places I'd never dreamed I'd see, build a life that's messy and complicated and perfectly imperfect. People still judge sometimes, still question how real our relationship is, whether I ever really loved him or just needed him. I've stopped caring what they think. I know the truth. I needed him, and I loved him, and those two things were never mutually exclusive. He saved me, yes, but I saved him too, from a lonely life and an empty house,
from success without purpose, from having everything and nobody to share it with. We saved each other, and that's the best story I could ever tell. Drop a comment if this story moved you, and tell me, what would you have done in Amara's place?